I've been asked to explain a little more about how I play some of the tunes I play on the DG Melodeon. So this little video really should be taken as a series of little ideas that you may or may not like to use. Some people, I've no doubt, will consider this stuff completely unnecessary and the height of bad taste, and other people might find some of it a lot of fun. This tune comes from the fantastic Percy Brown, a gentleman who passed away I think in the 70s. If you can get to hear a recording of him, do so. He was a terrific player with a wonderful light touch and some terrific tunes. Okay, I'll play this tune through slowly without any chords at all to muddy the water. So this is for people who'd like to learn how to play it. Okay, that's a sweet little tune, I'm sure you'll agree. I'd like to play it now with what is often called a 3-chord trick. That's the standard 3 chords that we often play when playing tunes in the major. In this case G major, and those standard 3 chords are, I'm sure many of you are aware, G, D and C. If you're a rhythm guitarist or a pianist, you might make that D a D7, but we're not given that on a melodeon. Not an 8-bass melodeon anyway. You might think I use a bit more of that, what we call the 5th chord, the D chord, than many people would do. I do this because it's a way of introducing a bit more variety whenever the G chord would go on a bit long. Of course, if the tune's in G and you use the G chord more than is strictly necessary, it can be a little bit dull. So as I play the A music in this tune, I quickly go to the D chord, I think as early as the 2nd bar. Let me show you what I mean. And just to compare, if I stuck to the long G chord at the beginning over 2 bars, let's have a look at the B music and the straightforward chords. notice that where I fell onto that D note on the right hand at the end of the phrase, once again I used the D major chord. And just for a little fun, at the end of the phrases I just slipped in a little of the fourth chord, the C. Well, it's one of the games we can play to add a little variety and a little interest to a tune. I think the basses on that B music of this tune are reasonably straightforward in other respects. I'm hoping that if you sit and watch and play along, you'll be able to pick them up quite quickly. What's a bit more challenging is how I actually play this tune myself. Because instead of those D major chords that I slipped in for interest earlier, I often use a B minor 7. I make the B minor 7 on the DG melodeon by hitting the D chord and the B bass on the next row. That's the D chord and the B bass on the next row. It makes a rather handsome and useful chord and a nice variation, I think. And it's often handy where you would think that the chord for a bar or half a bar was a G because the notes in the tune are B and D. But actually the B minor chord, just forget the seventh part for a moment, the B minor chord is F sharp B D compared with the G chords G B D. So you can see really only one note, one important note, changes when you go to the B minor 7. And that's the reason, and that's where this chord will work as a substitution for the standard G chord. It will work where it won't clash with a lot of G on the right hand side. I'll just show you how that clash sounds. That doesn't sound too good, but with the B or the D, it sounds super. But any note from the D chord, obviously, sounds very sweet with it. Righto, let's see how that works in practice. B minor, C, D, B minor, C. The other thing I'd like to point out that I do at the beginning of that tune is designed to make as much volume as possible out of this little box for situations where one's playing for dancing or in a pub or somewhere where it's difficult to get attention, or maybe there's a hubbub and people can't hear. What I'm doing is I'm making a chord on the right hand of the box. So when I get to that second bar where I go into the B minor, watch what happens on the right hand. Okay, I'm playing that triad of notes, 3 notes, D on the G row, A, and then F sharp. It sounds very sweet, I think, against the B minor chord made on the left hand. You can even use that, the A and the F sharp on the right hand, to punctuate the rhythm, to reinforce the rhythm. So it might go. And I'm using the trick again as well when I come to the 5th chord at the end of the phrase, where I come to that D chord. So I'm using the same chord on the right hand when I'm playing the B minor 7, and again when I'm playing the D. Let's see that again. playing a C chord here. I'm making that up by taking E from the D on the D row. I've got the C on the pull on the B button on the G row, and E from pulling on the D button on the G row. So that's E, C, E. It sounds fabulous against the full C chord on the left hand. Practice it with me for a moment. You'll notice that even when I'm not pumping chords in the right hand or the left hand, I'm always pulsing the box to get that boo woo woo boo woo woo that's at the heart of a waltz. Okay, the next couple of bars in this tune I play a held G underneath this one, and then an octave up I'm playing G and then D and then G. And then on the next bit, which pulls, I'm playing the F sharp below the G with this finger. At the middle of that A music, where it goes from G to D to G. I can't think of anything particularly special to do with that, except to perhaps to fit in a couple of little stabs across this G row here. The little turnaround at the end, which goes from C into G, I play C, pull on the G row, a D, pull on the D row, and an E on the pulling on the G row, and the chords follow along. Now we come to the B music, which is gorgeous in this tune, and the way to get all the fun you can out of this one, I think, is to use the D row. Just as we were using this big long chord in the G a moment ago, you can do the same in the D. And against, as I showed you before, against that B minor 7, it's terrific. So, I'll just show you the beginning of this very slowly. So I use that C chord again as well. So it's G into B minor to C into G. Into C. You can see how I recycled some of the chords I used on the A music in the B music to really quite nice effect. That I think is particularly sweet. This C chord's really useful, really useful. And you don't even move your fingers when you go to the G chord next. That's the G. C, and G. C, and G. And now I think I'd better play this tune in its full waltzes. Well, I hope that was of interest.